It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? It's part 2 of the Take Command 2024 NFL Draft Guide. That is Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman, and today, Logan, we're talking defense. We're getting defensive.
I guess so. That's how you want to talk about him.
No, we're not. Me getting defensive would be me losing my lid about some of the comments on quarterback talk, which I'm saving that for a segment on our radio show called Never Read the Comments, which you can listen to on the Hoffman Show now Thursdays at 5:30. So, check.
Can we talk about that for 1 second? I do think it's fascinating with this quarterback class specifically, how dogmatic people get about specific guys. Like, this is the guy. Like, someone DM'd me after the show last week and was like, oh, it's Michael Penix. You're wrong. He's the best quarterback in the class. And I was like, I'm not going to tell you that you're straight up wrong, but like, I don't agree. And I think every time these comments come up, it honestly shows you, it's like a little microcosm of the NFL. Like, you can go to the NFL Combine and ask a regional scout who their best player is, and it's not someone you would expect. And then you talk to a GM, and it's not someone they would expect. And I just think it shows you how beauty is truly in the eye of the beholder with this stuff. And so this is our opinion, Craig and I's opinion, and you can have your own opinion. If you got your own big board, feel free to send it to us. We'd love to check it out.
Send it to Logan. I don't care.
Yeah, send it to me on Instagram or whatever. But it is one of those things where it's like, I get so surprised that like, this is the way, this is the truth. And it's like, nah, man, like, a lot of these quarterbacks are going to be successful depending on where they end up going and where their landing spot is and how they're insulated and how they individually mature. So, but yeah, always a fun conversation.
Well, I think there's two things that, since we're into it now, there's two things that genuinely like anger me. You're so much better at handling it than me, probably because I live it like on the radio.
You're doing the radio every day, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you have
minimal fan interaction. Let's just say that smaller amounts of fan interaction.
Yeah, or as I said, you have a life. No, I have a life. It's not fair to me. You have minimal fan interaction. I dive into the comments. I take the calls. all that stuff. But I think like one that really stuck in my craw was this idea, and it probably is because this person was straight up a jerk about it. It
not
was like
nice. It's
personal.
So funny. Like, why are you not nice?
Be nice. Just like be nice on the internet. It's not that hard. But he's calling us lazy, which is hilarious for anyone that knows us, because our quarterback evaluation has evolved as we've watched more film. Yeah. And it's like, well, why didn't you watch all the film in whatever and make your rankings then? All the data has been in outside of the pro days, and you're not going to, it's a small sample. And he tried to sound really smart of like sample sizes and this and that. And it's like, no. Like, we cover the NFL year round. And by the way, our process, and the thing that I think bothers me about it is we've been very open about it. We've been very transparent. We've said from go, this is how our process is going to work, because we spend the entire year watching the NFL and covering the NFL. And for me, I'm also doing the NBA, and like, I've got a lot of other stuff that I'm paying attention to for my job. My job is not to be an NFL scout. But I think what's interesting is like one of the examples I fired back with on this is like Matt Miller, whose job is NFL draft year round. He had JJ McCarthy top 10 in his first mock draft. Like, the people that have been on this the entire year, and I think some of the reporters who have like very early in the process said like JJ McCarthy's stock is going to rise. The reason they predicted it is because they talked to people who do this year round who had done that. And so for us as people who hadn't gotten a chance to watch that tape, and considering how transparent we were about, hey, this is going to be an ongoing process and ongoing evaluation both as we watch more and as more tape becomes available, because we don't have special access to, we're not paid and to have access to, or in jobs that have access to all 22 tape for every game. We can't just flip on any game we want. So all of a sudden another game pops up on YouTube, and like, we got to do the work and watch it. But you go from, initially just a bunch of highlights and TV tape or TV copies of games to actual all 22 film. And the evaluation is going to evolve. You learn more information. You watch things multiple times and you see stuff you didn't the first time. That is to be human. That is how this process works. And if you want to be some stuck up jackwagon on the internet who is like, you're lazy, you didn't do all the work, like, I just don't know what to tell you. Like, one, we were honest, not about not doing the work. We're not honest about our laziness. We're honest about the process. Two, it's not laziness, it's practicality. And 3, I'm not going to say here what I want to say here because it's
professional,
and I just preached being nice on the internet.
But I would say that the big thing for us, at least this year, like last year, I did have access to the All-22 for every athlete through PFF, and then obviously things changed at work, and that wasn't part of the package anymore, or whatever. But this year, like it's been really predicated on what's been available online, and so like I think the big thing for us is I want to say about 2 weeks ago, a JJ McCarthy all throws reel came up, and we got to watch every single throw back to back, every single run, and that was a big deal for me as opposed to kind of having to watch games. You got to just see the throws, and when you get that kind of information, it's awesome. And I think like that's part of the evolution. And there's times, honestly, like we're gonna do defensive rankings today, like where I watched Tyron Arnold and I'm like, this is a good football player. And then I watched Wiggins and I'm like, oh, is he better now? Like, how do I feel about him on, April 3rd, as opposed to when I first started watching this, which was probably 4 months ago. You know what I'm saying? Like it's evolving, things change. You talk to people. I talk to people who know the position better and they give you a different perspective. You're like, well, I didn't really think of it that way before. And so I think the evaluation's constantly evolving, not only with quarterbacks, but with every position. And I also think it just shows you, in my opinion, how close guys are. Really, really you're splitting hairs and you're just saying, I like this guy because of X or I like this guy because of Y. There's not a definitive right answer. And I think that's the thing that I keep coming back to with it. And so again, I think it's a good exercise when fans reach out, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's an inexact science. It's an art. And so it's my opinion. I try to ground it as much as I can in my experience and all that kind of stuff. And I hope the fans do the same thing, but that is why it's fluid. We get new information, our perspective change. I talk to somebody different. I talked to an NFL guy and he's like, oh, did you ever think about this? And I'm like, no, I didn't. Let's put that in the evaluation now. So,
yeah. And actually, since we're here and, look, as much as we want to do the defensive stuff and in parts, like let's do something different than quarterback. Here's another piece of information that got interjected into my thought process yesterday. We're just going to go ahead and dive full in because we're already halfway through a segment of the podcast anyway. Dan Orlovsky and Mina Kimes had an interesting discussion on NFL Live. And Mina said, I wonder not what quarterback fits Cliff Kingsbury, but how Cliff Kingsbury is going to fit this quarterback. And her big data point was in Arizona in his last couple of years there, Cliff's offense was dead last, I believe, in motion and shifts. And so when we talk about insulating a young quarterback, giving them information, motion and shifts is the way to go in the eyes of many people. Mina is certainly, talk about beauty in the eye of the beholder. Mina Kimes and has lots of data that says like this is exactly how to do it. And she's talked to plenty of NFL people, and we see some of the Shanahan, McVay, et cetera, trees that use a ton of that stuff to undress defenses and give their quarterbacks information. And then you have certain guys like Aaron Rodgers who are like, please do not move anyone. Like, let me just see it, because they've been around so long that they can see. They've got like X-ray vision. They don't need the extra motion and stuff. They can see what's happening no matter what. But especially for a young quarterback, that seems like something that can be extremely helpful. And it's a big concern for Mina, and Orlovsky agreed about how these young quarterbacks fit with Cliff. And my initial reaction was, well, Cliff has shown, I think, more ability than he gets credit for to adapt and change. And I wonder, with the hiring of a guy like Anthony Lynn, who spent last year with Kyle in San Francisco, like how much influence that has on the offense and what they're going to build schematically here, and how much of it is air raid, how much of it is West Coast, how much they take some of the tools from, say, the West Coast and apply them to an air raid base and create something totally different, the air cliff, if you will. So like what does that look like? And then how do you apply that to which of these quarterbacks could handle it, and which one of their skill sets matches with the remaining elements of air raid, the remaining elements of West Coast, and whatever else? Like, that's the ultimate question they're trying to answer. And that's a really difficult question.
Yeah. No, I think it is. And I think when you look at their three offenses, the offense that they ran at North Carolina, the offense they ran not so much at Michigan, but definitely the offense they ran at LSU, there's all elements of air raid. I think if people think of it, if it's not, Mike Leach, it's not going to be totally air raid. It's not true air raid. And that's not true. Like, Mike Leach's influence on the pass game landscape of college football and the NFL is dramatic. And I think you see principles throughout, right? So I think, there are things you look at and say, and to your point about keeping it spread out, like I know some guys don't like they hate the motion. You mentioned Aaron Rodgers. Big Ben was another guy who didn't like it. I remember Jimmy coming in from New England when I was in San Francisco and not liking the amount of motion we did because it was just too hard for him to kind of adjust because defenses adjust. So I definitely think like it just depends on who your guy is and what you're doing. But I do think like there are principles of air raid. And so I think that's the easiest, to me, that's the easiest part. Like if you want them to run stuff from the gun, there's stuff there for you. And it's just about how you tailor that air raid principle to the guy, right? So if Jaden Daniels is the quarterback here, my version of the air raid, which I don't think Cliff is going to do. I think it's going to be much more pro style than air raid. Like, especially when you go back and watch the 2021 stuff, 2022 stuff, 2021 stuff, it looks like NFL stuff. It looks like more akin to Kyle Shanahan. The formations are a little bit different, but like that's more what it looks like in terms of play actions. And then on third down, you're in the air raid stuff. But I'm gonna cultivate that offense to kind of find opportunities that fit him. We're gonna run more probably box fades like than I would with Drake May, right? Because Jaden Daniels, like that's his superpower. He's excellent at that, right? I'm gonna run more quarterback run stuff. I'm gonna run that triple option. That modern triple option that they ran in the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. Like I'm going to do more of that stuff. And I think that's smart. I think that's why you bring in, the quarterback coach or the offensive coordinator from Philly. That's why you bring in Anthony Lynn. You bring in guys that are going to help you elevate schematically what that player does. And then same thing if Drake May's the quarterback. It's going to look a little bit different, like hard play action, deep digs. Like he can see that a little bit better. He's got more confidence to throw it. I think the quarterback run stuff is still there, but in a way that's more akin to Daniel Jones as opposed to something that's going to be a feature of the offense and used to truly regulate the defense. And then you get to J.J. McCarthy, and I think when you watch his film, even though Michigan does a lot of stuff that's like pro style, right? Their past concepts, there's air raid principles because again, it's air raid has kind of infected or effected is a better word, the entire landscape of the NFL pass game. So I look at that and I say, if I want to find something that fits my scheme, it might not be exactly the same, but I see a guy who can throw, Y cross at a really high level. I see someone who can throw drive at a high level. I see someone who can throw fades and goes and check the stuff and get those play calls out that we need to. So I think it's just about saying, and I think that's the subjective nature of this, is like they're not going to a concrete situation. They're going to go to a fluid situation, and the coaching staff is going to mold and change to kind of best adapt to that player. So I think that's something that is incredibly critical. And so when, Mina Kime says Cliff doesn't do a lot of motion, like she's right. She's well researched on that. But I also don't think that version of Cliff is going to be calling plays and installing an offense in 2024.
Right. And it becomes then like, how much can the quarterback handle, right? Like this is one of Nate Tice's big things in his love affair with Drake May. Sorry, Nate. Is like he's like, hey, Drake called the protections. Like Drake was on top of all the mental stuff at North Carolina, where Jaden, it's more of that classic college, big clap. All right, now let's look to the sideline. Coach is going to call everything. And if you have experience calling some of the protections and handling some of that stuff, and also obviously, look, they signed Tyler Biadasz for a reason. They signed a veteran center with a ton of experience and who can help the quarterback make the calls there. But you have all of these factors coming together to try to create the best version of an offense in 2024, which probably will look different than their offense in 2025 because the quarterback will have a year of experience and personnel will be different and the whole deal. So it's just like all these factors coming together, back to the original point, that being dogmatic is silly because it also goes into your risk tolerance. It goes into what characteristics you weigh above anyone else. I think the stuff that's driven me like kind of nuts and I'm tired of explaining myself, if you will, on the internet or on the radio show is just, hey, like you can have your opinions, but like you don't get your own facts. And if you say that, all JJ McCarthy is a game manager, like you can just say you haven't watched JJ McCarthy. That's fine. Like it's fine. That's a very silly statement. Now, if you're like, hey, I see that stuff, but I think the go balls and some of the deep stuff that's not like maybe the weakness in his game is a big part of what I want to do offensively because we know Cliff likes to throw deep and that's not my guy. Okay, fine. I respect that. If you want to say whatever you want to say about Drake May, that's accurate and weigh it a certain way, fine. Same thing with Jaden, whatever. But like turning players into things that they are not is just silly. Don't do that. I mean, I guess you can, but please just save me the comments and the phone calls and all that stuff from it. But I think that I think you said it well. The dogmatic nature of player selection I think happens every year, but because Washington has the number 2 pick, because it's quarterback, I think it's hitting us a little harder this year. This fan base is just falling into it a little bit more compared to other years. And that's part of what makes this fun, but also part of what drives you nuts when you're when it's 4 months worth of it from January until ultimately April 25th in the draft.
No, absolutely. And I think, and again, that's why this is such a fun process, because it's there's so much information specifically regarding the quarterback position. Like you alluded to, there's styles, there's, personalities, there's offensive philosophy, there's demand on the position, there's the studying, there's the leadership. And I think like that's something that makes it ever moving and ever changing. There are guys that won't move. You mentioned Nate Tice, who does a great job with his analysis. But to me, it's like, the more information we get, the more people I talk to, I'm going to change my evaluation because there is an ever changing value to this process, specifically with the quarterback position. I think that's what makes it fun. So.
Yeah. Even Nate's colleague, Dane Brugler, who does this year round, like he had a point where he moved Drake up ahead of Caleb Williams, and then he did a little bit more digging and a little bit more homework and a little bit more watching. And he's like, nah, I had it right the first time, because you start to second guess yourself. And that's the nature of evaluation when you don't have to make a decision for as long of a time as you do in the NFL draft process. So there's a bit of a peel back of the curtain of how this all works and why an open mind is often a good thing. And, Logan, we only have 22 more days of this stuff. 22 more. So let's finally talk about the defense. All right, now back to our regularly scheduled programming, Logan. A look at the defense in 2024. This class is not very strong, especially at the top. Is it just especially at the top or only at the top? How would you kind of qualify this defensive class for the 2024 draft?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there are years where there's more talented groups. I think there's a lot of questions about guys. I think when you look at the edge class specifically, like I think that feels like a good group. That feels like a group that's very talented. They've been very productive. I think they project well to be NFL pros. I think linebackers weak this year. I think there's 2 guys that might go in the second round that are, again, good football players, but then it kind of becomes much like the running back class where beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and it's about making those decisions kind of based on scheme fit and things like that. Not that scheme fit isn't always a part of it. I do think there are some talented interior players, but I don't think the peak is as high as it's been in years past. And then corner is really interesting to me too, because I think there are guys that have been kind of circled by the national media as being like, this guy's going to be the next guy. But when I watch the film, I don't see a Sauce Gardner. I don't see a Witherspoon in this class where you turn on the film and immediately you're like, that is a top 10, that's a top 15 player in the NFL draft. And like last year with the cornerback class, I don't know if everyone remembers, there was, Witherspoon, Banks, Forbes, all these different football players, Gonzalez,
went to New England.
Gonzalez, right? And you watched any single one of them, and you were like, even Gonzalez, who was a little bit up and down, and you're like, athletically, this guy is the answer. And I just feel like there's a lot of questions about this group. So in the same way that Marvin Harrison Jr. is an incredibly clean evaluation, there are very few guys that are clean in this class defensively. There are guys that you like. There are guys you think project really well, but there's no surefire kind of like, this is the guy, in the same way that like Joe Alt would be. There's not that guy defensively this year.
Yeah. So, well, let's get into the edge class. I know there's one guy in the corner class that I think has a chance to be kind of in that realm in the eyes of a lot of people. So I'll run him by you, as well as some other names coming up in a little bit. But let's start off with the edge class. And there are, I think, 2 guys that kind of are at the top here. Jared Verse out of Florida State. He's more of your traditional 4-3 edge type of body. And then your guy, or I guess there's 3. Your guy, Latu out of UCLA. And then I think the number 1 edge player actually above both of them is Dallas Turner out of Atlanta. That match with your rankings, that seems to be kind of the layering for most people.
So I actually have Leatu Latu, excuse me, ahead of, he's my number one edge. And I just think like there is a refinement to his ability. And again, like I don't have the injury, I don't have the medical stuff, but any scout that I've talked to, any kind of national draft media person that I've talked to has basically said he's going to give you 10 sacks in his rookie year, and they're going to be good sacks. And he's just such a refined pass rusher. He tested better than everyone thought at the combine. And for me, I'm just like, I want 10 sacks. And I think there is a ceiling that is much, much higher with Dallas Turner, for example. I think Dallas Turner, when you look at his combine, it was crazy. I think he's 34 and 3/4 inch arms. He jumped 41 inches. He ran a 4.47. Like, that shows up on tape 1000%. But like in terms of the football refinement, it's not quite there. So I think there is a little bit of a projection, the same way that you're projecting Drake May. But with edge rushers, that projection's a little bit easier. Traits project better at the NFL level than it does for quarterback, for example. And then I think Jared Verse is a guy who's also a very traits-driven player, but is a little bit stiff in the hips. I think he's an excellent power rusher. He's got a great power profile. He plays hard. The thing that gets me a little bit worried and why he's my third guy is he's got some tightness in his hips that makes me go, like, where are you in this? Are you going to be able to use your power? Yes. Are you going to be able to turn the corner at the NFL level and be a disruptive guy, or are you just going to be a 7-sack guy? And there's nothing wrong with being a 7-sack guy. Like, that's a productive member of your defense that you feel good about. But I worry about his kind of ceiling as opposed to his floor. I think he's got a very solid floor. I don't know if his ceiling is that high because of that hip tightness.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Verse though, like, can he set an edge? All the other non-sack stuff, because he's so freaking strong. Like that's going to be an appeal in certain defenses more than others. Again, beauty in the eye of the beholder. Then you've got kind of the next group of guys, which could go anywhere from like teens to where the Commanders are picking at 36 and 40. I would say. Yeah. You have your Chop Robinsons, who's kind of the physical, we do our freaks. Chop Robinson is the winner of the freak category in terms of athleticism. Chris Broswell out of Alabama, who played obviously opposite of Dallas Turner. Your guy, Darius Robinson, who, by the way, Matt Miller's most recent mock, he had Robinson and Patrick Paul going 36 and 40. And I was like, did you do this for Logan? So Darius Robinson, but then a couple other guys, Braylon Trice out of Washington, Marshawn Nealon, who I know you like, out of Western Michigan. It's funny because I think initially this edge class got a rep for not being very good and very deep. And then we were doing a show, 2 months ago, I think right after the Senior Bowl. And I was like, what about this guy? And you're like, I like him. What about this guy? Yeah. I like him. And so there actually is a little bit more depth in this second tier than I think initially people thought.
I totally agree. And so, for me, the next best player is Darius Robinson. I think he just has a physicality and a toughness and a mindset and a body type that is very unique. And I do think people undervalue kind of the Cam Jordans of the world, these power rushers that can compress the pocket and make and cause pressures, maybe not sacks, but cause pressures against tackles who aren't used to seeing that type of body type. I'm a little bit up and down on Chop Robinson in terms of his production. He doesn't use his hands well. Like, the refinement of the position is not there. But like you said, dude's a freak. And you see that freakiness.
And as you said, traits translate real well. And he's got, boy, does he have traits.
Traits translate really, really well. And I think he's a guy that, again, traits are traits, and he's got them. And I think if you get him with a good defensive line coach, and it's one of the things like where if he were to slip and were to fall for whatever reason, 236 and Washington picked him, I think you're doing backflips, because I do think Dan and Witt have a really good feel, or they've shown a feel for kind of how to take a guy who has a lot of traits and put him in a position where he could be successful. So he's a guy that I think is interesting. Trice, Nealon is kind of my next group of guys, and I think both those guys are, I'm probably a little bit higher on Nealon's athletic upside. He's big guys. I think he's 6'4", 6'5", 268, 270. But all of his agility drills, all of his jump stuff was great. And I think you see a guy who just plays with his hair on fire. Trice is a guy that I like his film a lot, but again, kind of did some weird stuff in prepping for the combine. He lost a bunch of weight. He got down to like 240 to run fast. He was listed at 270 in the season, so he lost 30 pounds from the end of the season to now. Kind of just a weird call, and then didn't test as well as you'd expect a 240 guy to test. So kind of just like a weird decision. Right. His film's excellent, but like, I'm just like, that's a conversation I would like to have with him. Like, who told you to do this? Why'd you do this? And but that's all right. I think he's an excellent football player. So I do think there is in that second tier guys that can contribute. They're not as dynamic as the top three guys, obviously, but I do think there are some there are some legs to this class. Like Noah Ellis is a guy no one really talks about from Utah, who's got some tremendous pass rush savvy and nuance. And I think he'd be there. I know he'd be there at 40, but maybe he slips into the third round. You get an excellent edge rusher there. So I think there's a lot of really good football players at this position. And it feels like maybe not the top, like the peak's not as high, but there's a wide base of talented people that can contribute at the NFL level.
Yeah, that 67th pick, maybe there's someone there. So this is the benefit of having as many picks high as you do. And if you all of a sudden there's a run and you need to get back into the 50s, like you can probably do that pretty easily. So that's an important thing to remember in terms of the movability and the flexibility for the Commanders. All right, defensive tackle is up next. There's, I think, one name that kind of was floating above the rest. I guess Jer'Zhan Newton is maybe in there from Illinois, but Byron Murphy, the second from Texas, seems to be the top defensive tackle guy in most NFL circles. What makes him special? And like, is he a Payne Allen level prospect, or are we talking about the height of this class being less than that?
I think the height of the class is less than that. I think you see a higher athletic upside, which I think is why people get pretty juiced for him. And I think you see a power and a strength to his build that is exciting, and I think you see some pass rush nuance. And again, you never saw the production translate. He was playing on a pretty good defensive line, I thought. Like Devondre Sweat was playing next to him.
Yeah, the next guy on the list is probably his teammate. So you got two. You have an Alan Payne situation, but not quite an Alan Payne situation.
Right. And I do think that you kind of were always hoping for more, but I think you see like violent hands and ability to sink and get low and split double teams, rush the passer. He's quick-footed. He's like a dancing bear out there. He looked great at the combine. He tested well. And so I think, again, like of the guys, obviously Jer'Zhan Newton, is a good player, but I didn't see the athletic kind of potential that you see with Byron Murphy. And so I think the production's there for Newton, but that kind of just that home run ability, that guy to just be a game wrecker, I think that's Byron Murphy. And I do think coming out of the combine, he put himself in position to be the first defensive player taken. So, I have Latu, and I think he's kind of in that same, or Dallas Turner, he's kind of in that same bucket. Like if someone falls in love with him, which I could definitely see, I think he could be the first defensive player taken.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, most mock drafts that I've seen, the first defensive player off the board is Dallas Turner at 8 to Atlanta. He's being mocked there constantly. But, Murphy is definitely a guy that pops up in that range. As you mentioned, all it takes is, Kyle Smith and friends down there in Atlanta to say we actually like Latu better, and he's the guy at 8 instead of Dallas Turner. So, we could see, but definitely good to kind of understand the tiers here. In that next tier, you have Newton out of Illinois. You have Murphy's teammate, Devondre Sweat, out of Texas. Braden Fisk out of Florida State. And then that's probably the end of the tier. Guys like Chris Jenkins out of Michigan, who I mentioned because I'm assuming it's Chris Jenkins Jr. I remember junior, I watched his dad for a decade in Carolina. Big old Chris Jenkins in the middle there. But is he starting the tier below? So it's Sweat, Fisk, Newton for you?
Yeah. So for me, it's Fisk, Chris Jenkins actually, and then Sweat. It would be my kind of that next tier, those next three.
So Newton's even farther down for you?
Oh no,
or is he up there? He's up there with Murphy.
He's in the tier with Murphy, yeah. So those are my next three guys. Like Fisk tested awesome. He plays with his hair on fire. He's got some short arms, so you kind of wonder about his down-to-down ability to stay on the field. But I like the player. I like the prospect. I think he's going to be a good pro. It just depends on it. Kind of like with Jared Verse, but like to a lesser degree. It's like, what is your role at the next level? Like, are you juiced up enough to be a third down pass rusher, or can you kind of be a 5-tech? Like, what is your role? You're a little undersized, not crazy, but a little undersized. So yeah, we'll see what happens with him. But I like the film a lot. I like the player a lot. Again, the production just never came around for him. Chris Jenkins for me is ahead of Sweat because I think he can be an every down player. I think when you look at the athlete, tested really well, is extremely powerful, has a great motor, which I love to see in defensive tackles, and I think he can develop as a pass rusher. But I think the athletic traits and the athletic foundation's there, and I think he's just a blue-collar, hard-nosed run stopper now, but he's going to project into something more, which is pretty exciting. And then obviously Devondre Sweat his film's excellent. Like, I love his film. Like, again, if he was in better shape, he'd probably be in that top tier, but he's not. He weighs 366 pounds. So, like, what is the role for that guy at the next level? I think he does a great job stopping the run. He's got quick feet. He's got kind of some explosive burst for a guy that's that size. He uses his hands really well, but, conditioning is going to be a big thing for him, and like how often is he actually on the field. So,
gotcha. All right, let's knock out linebacker real quick, and then we'll do the back seven clump together. So Peyton Wilson out of North Carolina State is the guy here. He's got a chance to go first round, probably second, but he's the top guy at the position. Class of one there, and then a bunch of guys that I know you like, but it's kind of, again, beauty in the eye of the beholder. Or what traits do you like? What fits for your defense? Is that accurate in terms of the characteristic of this class? Yeah,
I think the other guy that I'd put kind of like 1A, 1B, kind of depending on what you like, with Wilson is Edgerrin Cooper from Texas A&M, the linebacker there, right? He's got long arms. He kind of almost looks more like an edge rusher to me on film, but he closes the football crazy. Like he's a athlete. He's a missile to the ball.
17 TFLs in 2023.
Yeah, and it's fun to watch him, right? It's fun to watch him chase down receivers and running backs and guys that they think have the edge on him. He's physical. He's a little raw. I get a little bit of like, and I don't mean this in a bad way, a little bit of Jamin Davis vibes in terms of how he takes on blocks. Like he's not always perfect in terms of technical, but I do think in terms of production and I think in terms of mindset, like he's a guy you're like, yeah, this dude's got it. It's just about, for me, it's like he plays well near and around the line of scrimmage. How does he do in coverage? A lot of these college defenses don't demand a lot of those linebackers in the same way they're going to be demanded of at the NFL level. So a little bit of a question mark there, but tested, moved well at the combine, a guy that I like quite a bit. But yeah, it's those two guys, and I think you could have a team that says, "Oh, we like Cooper a little bit better than Wilson for XYZ reasons." But then I think you kind of get into tier two, and for me, it's Gray from North Carolina. I just think he's got an athletic upside and a pass game upside that I like. I think he does a good job of like technically taking on blocks, and I think his athletic foundation is a little bit better than kind of than like the rest of the linebackers, right? So I don't say I don't want to say he's in his own tier because he's not, but I think he's got a lot of things that you watch him on film, you say that translates really well, like his feel in zone, his ability to play man, the way he takes on blocks. He's very instinctive and he closes to the football in a nice way, which I like quite a bit. So.
Gotcha. So if you had to pick a, let's say, third, fourth round guy who gets to be Bobby Wagner's understudy, is there one that you like here, whether it's Gray, whether it's Junior Colson out of Michigan, Trevin Wallace, Kentucky, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. out of Clemson's a name that winds up in a lot of mock drafts in the 4th, 5th round to Washington. Is there one in particular for any reason that you like if we're going to say, 3rd round and later?
Yeah, so obviously Gray would be, because he's the 3rd guy on my list, but Maurice Liuafu, I probably butchered that, but he's from Notre Dame. And when you turn on the tape, he's a guy that's big. He's like 6'3", he's 200 and almost 40 pounds, 239 pounds, I want to say, long arms, and just has this like traditional linebacker approach to life. Like pulling guard, he is going to hit you in the chin and you're going to feel it, right? He knows how to use his length to take on blocks. He can run down receivers. He moves so well for a big man. I think his production at times is a little bit up and down. But if you watch the Navy game, if you watch, I think it was the Notre Dame game, he is all over the field. And I think there is a little bit of kind of an instinctive issue, like where are my eyes at, like where is my eye discipline at, because there's times where he's looking in the backfield and they're running a reverse or they're running a counter and he's a little late to the action. He relies on his athleticism to get him there, and again, he arrives with bad intentions. But in terms of frame, in terms of body type, like I think if he's there in the 4th, 5th round and you're like, we're looking for a body, like I think that's he has the body, and he has the kind of the mindset. It's just about kind of refining that. So I think like the way you characterize that is perfect. Like get him with Bobby Wagner and say, hey man, get this guy looking at the right stuff, doing the right things. And I think again, like he's the 4th guy on my list. And a lot of people say, oh, why not Junior Colston? And I just think the athletic upside, the physicality is a little bit more. And I want to play upside at linebacker. I want guys who could eventually start. And I think he could be a starter given the right development arc. Yeah,
and getting to watch what Bobby, what did you see here? That question gets asked a lot in the film room, I'm sure, this year by not just fellow players, but of the coaching staff in there. And if you can soak that in over a year and line up next year, sweet.
Yeah,
that would be pretty ideal. All right, to the defensive backfield we go. Wrapping up here on the Take Command podcast with Logan Paulson. I am Craig Hoffman. We're going to spend a lot of time, relatively speaking, on corner and not a lot of time on safety, Logan, because the safety class is not not exactly the world's strongest this year. And also, by the way, corner is a position of need for the Washington Commanders,
Correct.
and there are a lot of guys to choose from. The one guy that I kind of hinted at earlier, who some people, mainly my guy Trevor Sikkema / our guy Trevor Sikkema at PFF, absolutely love, who think could be kind of one of those top tier class corners. But admittedly, it is a projection, is Kenyon Mitchell out of Toledo. It's a projection because he's out of Toledo. He hasn't faced a lot of top tier talent versus, some of the guys that we've talked about before, Devin Witherspoon, Sauce Gardner, who played in more major conferences or against more major competition. But like, how is Mitchell in a class of his own in this cornerback class? And where do you kind of have him relative to those other really excellent prospects in recent years?
Yeah, so for me, he's not as good as the guys last year. I think he probably would have been probably the third or fourth guy last year. I'm trying to think of the guys I had ahead of him.
Well, so he's not better than Witherspoon. Witherspoon and Sauce, by the way, were top 10 picks. So that's a rare. Excellent. That's like an unbelievable, like 97 or higher grade prospect right there. So taking Witherspoon out of it, you had Forbes, you had Gonzalez,
Banks.
And you had Banks, all who were first rounders.
Yeah, and I think I would probably put Quinyon Mitchell ahead of Forbes, but below, even below with Banks, and then probably below Gonzalez is the way I would have had it, right? And I think and again, this is why. So he is a guy that at every step of the postseason process, so Senior Bowl, Combine, has just answered every test thrown at him. Like he looked like the dude at the Senior Bowl. Like his ability to recover, his size, his physicality, it's top level, it's top shelf, man. And I think that's something that I love. And I think when you look at him at Toledo, again, he's playing a lot of off cover three, a lot of off quarters. He's getting a lot of ball production because he's looking at the quarterback. But I think his elite superpower is his ability to have elite recoverability in routes, his elite ability to click and close. And I just say, like, that's a guy that, because of the athletic foundation and because of the film, like, I think you feel pretty good about him. And like you said, it's a projection because he is at Toledo, but to me, he does feel kind of like in his own tier. And so to me, after the Combine, I remember I made a note that I was reviewing last night when I was getting ready for the show. And I was like, he's, I think, made a case for himself as the first defensive player selected. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but I think he's definitely made an argument for himself to be picked there at 8 by Atlanta, for example, potentially. And that seems a little bit high for the level of competition that he's coming from. But again, I think it's not only that, it's the Senior Bowl, it's the Combine, it's everything he's done has just been, again, like truly elite in terms of where he's at. So,
yeah, when you see a guy who dominates at lower competition levels, like, you then want to see the testing because you're like, okay, was this, are you not that fast, but you're just fast compared to everyone there, or, strong, or the combination of fluidity and all those things. And turns out, no, the numbers are the numbers, and the testing is damn good. Then you got a couple guys, kind of the next class, who played at the absolute highest levels. Terrion Arnold at Alabama, Nate Wiggins at Clemson. I almost want to skip Cooper DeJean for the moment. Let's come back to him. Let's pull him out of the pile, and we'll explain why in a second. Then you got Rayshaw out of Missouri, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Alabama. And then that's probably the line where you're not getting into like the Kamari Lassers, TJ Tampas, et cetera, who are good players and we should talk about. But it feels like maybe McKinstry's the last guy that's got a real shot at going in the first round. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think, in some universe, Innis Rayshaw might go. I think Kamari Lassiter could go. If he had tested better, he'd for sure go because his film's excellent. But I agree. I think you're probably kind of at that Kool-Aid McKinstry inflection point there. And so for me, like, I keep going back and forth, honestly, between Terrion Arnold and Nate Wiggins, like in terms of who I would probably take ahead of him. And Terrion Arnold is a guy that is a football player's football player. He's ready to tackle. He fits runs. He's hitting pulling guards. Like, he does stuff that corners don't want to do. And I value that because I think when you look at corners that have been successful, especially, over the last couple of years, like, dudes that tackle tend to be okay at the NFL level, even if they're not truly elite coverage players, right? And I think he's got great short area quickness. I think he's got great instincts. The thing that gets me is, like, he's not a top shelf athlete. I think he's a good, again, his short area quickness is excellent. He's very instinctive, and so he makes up for a lot of that stuff. But is he a true outside one? Because there's times like where I see him relying a lot, like in college football, for example, they let you get away with a lot of contact at the catch point. Like that's just how they do it, right? And so he relies on that quite a bit. Like, can he move and pursue and close versus some of these elite receivers? And that's a big question that I have, because I think there's a section of his of the cut-ups that I've watched of him where he's attacking all these players from trail, and the ball placement by the college quarterback's not good. He's able to recover and make a play on the football. And so again, that's great job by him sticking with it. That's great job with late hands winning the down. But I'm always like, how does that play at the next level? And again, all the other stuff is elite. And he's an elite competitor. And I like that. But I think when you look at Nate Wiggins' comparison, like Nate Wiggins is 6'2". I think he weighed in 172 at the combine. He weighed in 185 at his pro day. It's not the biggest guy, but in terms of feet, in terms of length, in terms of ability to click and close, recovery speed, like dude has it. The thing with him though is, and again, he's probably the best coverage player, like pure coverage player in the draft class. The thing with him is he just he doesn't tackle. He doesn't want to tackle. And I know people find those clips of him like upending tight ends and hitting receivers in the back and like flexing on them and stuff. I don't really care about that. Like, you should do that. To me, it's like when you got to fit a run, like fit the run. Get where you're supposed to be. Force this back to the linebackers. They'll do the work for you. He just does not. He seems very content with sticking on blocks and making kind of pursuit tackles, which I understand. It doesn't feel good to tackle, but like, that's something that I keep going back on. So if I wanted a pure coverage player, like I might take him one. But there's a lot of kind of that other stuff that he doesn't do well. It doesn't do at a high level, which makes me very nervous about him. So,
gotcha. All right, time to play a game, which I know is your favorite. Here is the game. Would you take this guy at 36 or 40, or is it too rich? So I'm gonna name names, and you have to tell me kind of where the cutoff is. McKinstry is an obvious yes.
Yes.
He's probably a late first rounder, and if he falls, like hallelujah.
Yeah.
Lassiter, Georgia.
I like him a lot. Yes. I would say yes. I would take him at probably 40. Yeah.
Okay. TJ Tampa, Iowa State.
Yes. I would take him at 40.
Max Melton, Rutgers.
That's where the line gets a little bit weird. The only the person that I would take there that you didn't mention is Mike Sandersill from Michigan.
I was gonna circle back to him next. Yeah.
Yeah, like but again, he's a slot player. Like he's a really, really good player, but he's a slot player. And I feel like we've got a lot of slot players. I like Max Milton a lot, but I do think there's a little bit of a drop off after TJ.
So Tampa. Like Cam Hart, MJ Devonshire, those guys. Too
rich. Again, like I like Cam Hart from Notre Dame. I think he's a good football player. And this is where stylistically, I'm not sure what Dan's going to be looking for, because like Kyrie Jackson's here, Hart is here too. Like these big, long, freaky looking corners that have some good ball production. It's
Jackson is 6'4".
Yeah, it's like so. Like, and I know he's had a history of kind of valuing that skill set, but they don't run as much true cover 3 as they used to. So is that still what he's valuing? Because if you do, like Kyrie Jackson, it might be it's rich for me at 40, but maybe at 67 or whatever. Like that's where you take that guy. So,
all right. So Sanders still would be the last guy.
Yeah, but again, and then does he
36-40 list?
Kind of that same point though. Like, does he fit what truly what the Commanders need, which is a outside corner? And I don't think he fits that. I think he's a true nickel.
I don't know that they don't need a nickel. So like this is like the we don't know what they think of Quan Martin conundrum going into the draft of like, is Quan your nickel, or are Quan and Chin like these chess pieces that you're going to move around all over the place?
Right.
And who knows? Like I don't know. All right. Last but not least, and this guy's the transition talking point. Cooper DeJean out of Iowa. He has not done any of the testing because he's broke or he got hurt. I think it was a fibula or something late in the year. But he actually just sent this week a letter to all NFL teams saying he is cleared for all activities. So like he'll probably actually be good to go in rookie minicamp for most of things. So that's exciting, obviously, for him from a health standpoint. From a traits, from a testing, from a production standpoint, some people have him like up there with Mitchell.
Yeah.
But there's also is he an outside corner? Is he a slot? Is he a safety? What is Cooper DeJean to you, and where do you have him?
Yeah, so Cooper DeJean is like Talisi Fuaga on the offensive line for me, a guy that is going to be a good pro. It's just where where is his most valuable addition to the team, I think is the thing that I come back with him. And so when I look at Cooper DeJean, I see a guy who can play outside corner and has pretty good instincts and great ball skills. I see a guy who they played like in the big nickel, like he played linebacker, he played safety. And
Feels
I personally,
they're not going to be the same because Tyrann Mathieu was like one of the best college football players the last 25 years. But like, it feels like that where it's just like, where do you need me, coach? I'll go.
And I think that's kind of what he is. I think that's kind of, and again, Tyrann Mathieu's excellent. I do also think Cooper DeJean kind of fits that same role. Like if Cooper DeJean had been used like that more, I think we're talking about him in the same kind of vein as Tyrann Mathieu. Like, and he's a little bit bigger. And because he does a great job, man. Like he's physical. He attacks downhill. Like he's aggressive around the line of scrimmage. He's got great ball awareness. And when he intercepts the football, like he returned punts at Iowa, and he does a great job kind of maximizing interception yards. Like he's a heck of a football player. I think the thing with me and him in my evaluation is like, could he play outside corner? Yeah, but like, could he be an amazing kind of chess piece in the defense, much like Quan Martin was last year for the Commanders? I think yes. And I think if you get him with a creative defensive coordinator that can maximize what he does, like he might line up outside sometimes, that's fine. But I think his superpower is his flexibility, is his like true like athleticism, not in the sense of like I'm going to run a great 40 or jump super high, but like I'm just a ball player. And I think like getting him in a situation where he can maximize that is where his value is. So if you've got a defensive coordinator that says, I'm going to do that with him, kind of like, obviously Kansas City did with Tyrann Mathieu or New Orleans did with Tyrann Mathieu, I think he could go top 15. But I think it becomes about like defensive vision for a guy who's got the skill set that he has.
Like, don't let him fall to like San Francisco where Staley's now floating around.
Yeah, and you're like
his next star, player like he did with Jalen Ramsey, floating him around everywhere. Jalen's obviously an elite outside corner, as kind of a base as opposed to the other stuff. But like that kind of thing where like, let's just get a move piece and see what happens. Okay, the rest of the safety class, because if DeJean's a safety move piece, whatever. Beyond that, is there a first rounder to you in this group? Bullard from Georgia, Newbin from Minnesota, Bishop from Utah. These guys all feel like second round and later type of picks. It's just not the year for safeties.
Yeah, and I think Newbin's probably the closest one, but like I like Newbin's film. I do. I like it a lot, but I'm always a little bit unsure. Safety evaluation is always tough because I think like schematically, like what are they being asked to do? Like what does it work? What does it look like? What does it fit like? And I think he's got like he checks a lot of the boxes. I worry about his top end athleticism. So it takes him, for me, from a first round player to a high second round player. And I think if you drafted him, he could be a starter for a long time. But it is a little bit of a question about what he ultimately is at the next level, in my opinion, in terms of his skill set. So I think there's a lot of things to be excited about with him, but also there's a lot of questions. And again, very productive on the football in terms of getting interceptions. I think he's fearless. He's not fearless tackler. He's a good tackler. And I like that in the position. So it's him. And then I'm trying to get my list pulled up here. Sorry. Let me get this worked out. And then it's kind of like, your Javon Bullards, your Cameron Kitchens, your Kalen Bullocks. Like Kalen Bullock to me is like almost a non-starter for this team. He's got great ball production. He tracks the football extremely well, converted wide receiver from USC, but he doesn't want to tackle anybody. So like, I don't care about the ball production. Like they've made it very clear in this organization, you need to tackle, right? Cole Bishop's a guy that I love. Again, in the same way that I love Cooper DeJean, like his ability to kind of be, Eric Weddle-esque in that Utah defense because he's lining up at the line of scrimmage. He's blitzing. He's in the post. He's communicating rotations. He tackles well. He's not like this thunderous hitter, but he's got this kind of flexibility and this dexterity to kind of make plays. Jaden Hicks, man, depending on what game you watch, you think that guy's the second coming of Sean Taylor. Like I forget, I think it was the UW game I watched, and I was like, this guy is.
Did he murder a punter?
Dude, he was murdering everybody. You get some, you get some, you get some, and it was literally incredible. I was like, this guy is amazing. And then I watched the Arizona game, and I was like, this guy is not playing very good football right now. So it depends on which game you see.
Right.
But again, if you get the version that's him at UW, he's 6'3", he's 215, he hits, he's instinctive, he's got long arms, not a true post player, but in the line of scrimmage guy, like I was like, holy cow, this dude is impressive. But again, like they all have their warts. Like Cameron Kitchens, I know a lot of people like him. He can't cover the way people thought. Like at the Senior Bowl, he was getting worked over. And it kind of changes your perspective on these players. So I do think for this position specifically, because you don't have like those top end crazy athletes, you're going to be like, so it's going to be so scheme dependent. You know what I mean? And I think that's the thing about this safety class that's a little bit, it gets you kind of like, ugh, like I don't have a good feel for the evaluation.
The good news for Washington is they don't need one. Like if they draft a safety, it's because they like them on special teams, and it's like the 6th round, because you've already, and even then, like you've got Chin, Quan, Defoe, Butler, Reeves already.
Yeah. And I think there are guys like
that's it. That's the roster.
So for example, like Dominique Hampton from UW is a guy that like when I watch him, I'm like, you are a Dan Quinn safety. You're 6'3", almost 6'4". You got 34-inch arms. You're 215 pounds. He reminds me so much of the safety from Dallas last year, Curse. That kind of long linebacker type guy. So there are, and he tested like an absolute mutant. So like there are guys later in that round kind of range you're talking about, where if you're like, oh, hey, we need somebody that fits our defensive identity or fits a prototype, that you're like, oh man, Dominique Hampton's here, or Oladapo from Oregon State's here. Like, let's take a flyer on one of those guys as that 6th safety special teams guy that can develop for a year or two. I think I feel more comfortable about those guys down the list a little bit because of the traits and because of the body types. Right. But again, kind of a weird group. So
yeah, for sure. All right. So that is the 2024 NFL draft guide from Take Command. The offense on the Monday pod, the defense here on, as we recorded on Wednesday. You guys probably actually hear this on Thursday. So the Tuesday and Thursday pod, he said. We will be back next week with some fun stuff. We're working on a couple of cool ideas. But one of the things that I know we're going to do for sure is we're stealing from Mina Kimes' show. We're going to do a War Room mock draft. So I am going to select 2 players for each team and make Logan pick between the 2. So that'll be really fun for the entire first round. That'll be kind of our first full first round mock. So we will do that coming up next week. And we're getting real close to the draft too. So stay tuned for our draft plans, which we'll be announcing here shortly. For Logan Paulson, who you can send all your big boards to on Instagram at Logan_Paulson82.
Send away.
I'm Craig Hoffman. Subscribe to my YouTube channel at Craig Hoffman. Of course, you can watch full episodes of this show at the Team 980 as well. Just, don't send me your big boards. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.